Welcome to California in Focus. I'm David Mastio, and today we're talking about the 5-year update of California's water plan. With me today is the Center Square's California reporter, Kenneth Schrupp. Kenneth, what's in this water plan and what does it mean?
The state's 336-page water plan, which is updated every 5 years, focuses on 3 main topics: addressing climate urgency, strengthening watershed resilience, and achieving equity. What this new strategy means is that the state will be incorporating comment from a much wider variety of local stakeholders as it achieves its water goals. In reality, this means encouraging significantly more conservation. The expansion of California's water supplies takes really 2 main strategies. The first is this Delta Conveyance Project, which will take water from the San Joaquin Delta throughout into the State Water Project, which is the state aqueduct. And the other, which is the expansion of the state's reservoirs. Unfortunately, the state has not had a new reservoir with over 1 million gallons built since 1978. So unless we can significantly increase the speed with which we construct reservoirs, I mean, we got a proposition passed in 2014 that set aside billions of dollars for new reservoirs. The first project has not been completed yet for that. I keep getting emails from the people administering this program telling me that I need to stop saying that this bond hasn't yielded any projects yet, because they say projects have been funded, but money spent that doesn't mean a finished project doesn't mean much to me.
What's the problem with this plan?
The main problem with this plan is that there seems to be a significant drive to decrease the amount of water consumed by Californians without really increasing the supply of water in a meaningful way. And our economy in the state can't really accommodate that. We really are quite efficient with water. We are one of the most water efficient places in the entire country. And when you pull back the consumption to just a bare minimum, you don't actually leave any leeway for without building enough water supply, you don't leave any leeway for actually turning the screws and reducing consumption when things are tight. If you're already at 100% conservation effectiveness, then when a real drought and a real lack of water comes along, what tools do you have left?
So how full are the reservoirs? That's kind of the core of this question, right?
It is. And again, though, as I said, we haven't really meaningfully expanded our state's reservoir system since 1978, when about 1/3 of the number of people who live in California lived here. So we have 3 times the population and the same sort of water infrastructure capacity. What that shows you is we have become very efficient with our water use. The water reservoir capacity is over 100% of normal, and most of the state's reservoirs are pretty much full.
And the state is going to deliver about 30% of the water that it's been contracted to supply?
Yes, so the state is going to deliver about 30% of the requested supplies. This kind of measure is typically taken during a drought. I believe up through even like the early 2000s, we'd still deliver like 95% of the requested water unless there was some kind of extreme drought. This year, the last 2 years, we've had combined 2-year cycle of pretty much record rain and snowfall for recent decades. So we have so much water that we have to keep letting more into the ocean because otherwise our dams and reservoirs wouldn't have enough excess capacity to prevent flooding.
What do critics of this decision to supply only 30% of the water requested say is going to be the consequence?
Well, critics say that the consequence of this will be to empty out California's natural reservoirs or prevent their refilling even more. We have something called aquifers that are deep underground reservoirs of water that's been filtered down through stone and sediment. And pumping of aquifers used to take place when there's no water available, and farmers in general and even water districts across the entire state, they pump out aquifer water when there isn't enough state water project aqueduct water being delivered to meet local demand. And although there are more strict recharging requirements now for these aquifers, if these water districts and these farmers aren't getting enough water from the aqueduct, they're just going to keep pumping, and these aquifers are going to fill up even more slowly. So there really seems to be little environmental benefit to not giving these water agencies and farmers the water they've requested.
Why does the water situation in California matter to the country as a whole?
Despite, the rest of the nation having this reputation as feeding the country, really, if you are eating something, it's probably coming from California. If you're eating fruits and vegetables, it's coming from California. We even provide a lot of the dairy and beef for the rest of the country. I believe over a third of our vegetables and 3/4 of our fruits and nuts are grown here in California. So we're the breadbasket of this country. And if we don't have enough water to grow our crops, you're going to see prices go up. We already see global food crisis from potential disruptions to fertilizer supplies due to the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. So if we, in California, start growing a lot less food, the entire world could suffer.
I noticed in your story a couple things that stuck out as having little to do with the water supply situation in California. The first was the governor wants to use this water supply plan to achieve equity. Wouldn't equity be just making sure that everyone has the water that they need? How does equity fit in here? What does the governor mean?
It would make the most sense to achieve equity if everybody could use as much water as they pleased within a reasonable amount. By equity, I think we're focusing here in California on ensuring more diverse voices are included in our water decision-making process. For the first time, the state's water plan, as announced by the governor and proudly included in the executive summary, there's a whole chapter on Native tribes' contribution to water governance. And there's this one sentence here I'd like to read to you, which says, tribal government representation on decision-making bodies would facilitate incorporation of indigenous knowledge and practices of holistic watershed management.
In practical terms, do they say anything that we've learned from this?
Not that I'm sure of, but I'm sure once we incorporate more perspectives into decision-making bodies that we will hear what those contributions are. The plan also divides the state's water history into 3 segments, which is the first from 1850 to 1950 of resource extraction, the second from 1950 to 1970 of infrastructure expansion, and the third from 1970 to the present as sustainable resource management. So sort of implicit to that is saying that since 1970, we've stopped infrastructure expansion, but our population has tripled, which means that we're just not going to be building more infrastructure.
Kenneth, thanks for joining us today. Listeners can keep up with this story and more from Kenneth at thecentersquare.com.
Knowledge is power, and you deserve to know what happens in your state government. That's why the Center Square's reporting zeroes in on state authorities publishing stories that show where your money goes and who spends it. The Center Square gives power to the taxpayer by tracking politicians' use of the people's money and demanding transparency from state-run agencies. This is how the Center Square equips you, the American taxpayer, to hold your state government accountable. Sign up now for your state's Center Square newsletter at thecentersquare.com.